Oh, sorry. Evening all, and welcome to another tutorial on GCSE Geography Population Settlement Unit. And in this one, we're going to focus on the demographic transition model. And the aims of this tutorial are simple. We've got to know what the demographic transition model is, be able to draw and label the DTM, be able to describe and explain birth rates, death rates, and total population and how they change within the demographic transition model, and apply the DTM to a range of different countries. Okay. Now, before we get started, it's best to work out what this demographic transition model actually means and stands for. So, two big words in there: demographic and transition. Demographic simply refers to the population and the characteristics of a population. So, in terms of the characteristics of a population, we're thinking about birth rates, the death rates, the increase in that population, or the natural increase in that population, and how the total population changes. Transition is just that, it's change. So quite simply, the demographic transition model is a model that shows how population changes over time. Now, if you think about the key terms we need to know for this, these should all be familiar by now. So we've got birth rate, which is the total number of births per 1,000 per year, per 1,000 population per year. Death rates, which is the total number of deaths per 1,000 population per year. The population, which is the total number of people. And natural increase, which is the difference between births and death rates. Okay, quite simple. Pause that, just write them down, jot down the definitions if you need to. Okay, so the demographic transition model is split up into 5 stages. Okay, now the x-axis is time. Okay, the y-axis is the births and deaths and total population. So birth rate, death rate, and population. Oh, get rid of that. Sorry about that. Let's get my pen back. Okay, and the population. Now, it's split up into 5 models to show how a country or how different countries move throughout this. Okay, now we're going to draw on, and I want you to sketch this out as well and draw it with me. So if you need to pause it now just to get your page set up with this, we're going to add on birth rates, death rates, and total population. And we're going to do these in 3 different colours so they stand out. So I'm going to just pick a new colour so we'll start with blue. Okay, it's going to be blue for births. Now the birth rate in stage 1 is high, and it's sort of fluctuating a little bit. And this is also true in stage 2. Okay, but in stage 3, birth rates fall. Okay, and in stage 4, they are fluctuating and low. And in stage 5, I'm going to do this dotted for a reason I'll explain in a second. They're sort of in a decline. Okay, so the blue line here is birth rates. We'll abbreviate that to BR. Okay, then we'll have a look at the death rates. We'll do death rates in green. So in stage 1, the death rates, like the birth rates, are high and fluctuating. Okay, but in stage 2, they start to fall quite dramatically, and they continue to fall a little bit more slowly in stage 3. Okay, and in stage 4, they are low and fluctuating. By stage 5, they start to rise a little bit. Okay, I'll explain all the changes in a second or two. So the green one, DR for death rate. Okay, the last line that we're going to add on, we'll do this in orange, okay, is the total population. So in stage 1, I'm going to find my pointer, stage 1 is low and fluctuating. Okay, stage 2 and 3, it rises. And stage 4, it's high and fluctuating. In stage 5, it starts to fall. Right, now this is the total population, so we're just going to call this P. Now, there's an area of this graph which is a bit of interest, okay, and I'm just going to shade that in another colour. Some of it, yeah, we'll go purple, okay, and that area is this area here. Okay, in between the birth rates and death rates, because what this shows, in this shaded area, this shows the natural increase. So if we just write in the shaded area, natural increase, or NI if you want to abbreviate it. Okay, if you're writing down the abbreviations, make sure you, somewhere on your page as well, you're also writing down what they actually stand for so you don't forget. So we've got to imagine this as the UK to start with, okay? And we're going to imagine how the UK has changed. We're not going to imagine, we're going to tell you, okay? Now, in stage 1, this would have been the UK around about, well, just before 1750, okay? So pre-1750, the UK's population had both high birth rates and high death rates. And this meant that the population was relatively low. Okay? Now between 1750 and 1870, the UK would have been in stage 2. This is where death rates start to decline, but birth rates are still high. And the population of the UK starts to increase. We can see there is an area of natural increase within stage 2. Okay, now between 1870 and 1950, the UK would have been in stage 3, where birth rates were starting to fall. And then post 1950, we would have been in stage 4. Okay, and arguably still are, but we might be in stage 5. Okay, now what stage 5 is starting to show, is it's starting to show that there is a population decrease. And this is down to the fact that where death rates are low, this usually means that there's a higher life expectancy. So because there's a higher life expectancy, people start to live longer. And as they get older, obviously nature takes its course and more people start to die. But because there's more old people, that means that less people are having babies, so that means that the birth rate falls, and this actually leads to a population decrease. Stage 5, the area I'm going to shade in black, okay, we'll put a little arrow to it, we'll say pop decrease. Right. Now if you think about like countries, that's the UK's path if you like, let's think about countries and where they are actually in this at the moment. So in stage 1, where both death rates and birth rates are high, would be something like Amazonian tribes. Okay, those sort of people, those sorts of groups who don't have access to contemporary medicine or anything like that. In stage 2 might be Ethiopia, where like deadly diseases like malaria are starting to be treated and prevented, so that means that less people die, so death rate is starting to fall. Okay, stage 3 might be India. Now in India, it's a little bit more developed than places like Ethiopia, and they already have lower death rates and have got rid of many of the sort of really deadly diseases that plague places like Ethiopia. But what's also happened now is because they've experienced such rapid population growth, their population is quite high. And what they're doing now is they're providing education for women, which talks about family planning, and this has led to a fall in their birth rate. Now, the UK is about here at the moment, maybe just sort of moving towards the end of this stage, where we have very low death rates, very low birth rates at the moment. Our population is pretty stable. It's been around the 62 million mark for a while. It's still increasing ever so slowly, but not much at all. And in terms of a place where the population is starting to decline, this is probably best represented by Japan. And Japan's actually got a shrinking population, and arguably so has Germany. Okay, so places like Japan and Germany would be in stage 5. Now, we need to be able to explain why these changes happen. Why does death rate start to fall here? Okay, and it's primarily down to reasons such as improved healthcare, better sanitation, there we go, better access to food and water, or to food and clean water. Okay, all of these things are gonna make less people die. Okay, so if you can take control of, like we were talking about before, malaria, provide people with mosquito nets, provide effective medicine for if they do contract malaria, then less people will die, and this will lead to a decrease in the death rate. And in stage 3, the decrease in birth rate is primarily down to certain things. It might be the status of women is improved. Now, by this I mean that in some of the more less developed societies, a lot of women's rights are less than those of men, and they are seen more as sort of like the home-based person, if that makes sense. Somebody who brings up the children and things like that. In sort of more developed societies, women tend to be at work more often. Now, if they're at work more often, then that tends to have an impact on the actual birth rate and reduces it. Other things that might include it might be increased availability of contraception. You could pop to Tesco's now and buy yourself some condoms, no worries whatsoever, and then that's something that prevents our birth rate becoming too high. In other societies, contraception isn't that readily available. Other things to do with education and family planning. Now, each of you will do citizenship, PSHE or whatever, where it'll give you some sort of insights into things such as safe sex and family planning, and that's a privilege in many respects, but that also contributes to the fall in birth rates. Okay, now population increases here because death rates are lower than birth rates. Simple as that. Okay, it's steady in stage 1 and stage 4 because both birth rates, death rates are high here, and birth rates and death rates are low here. So because birth rates and death rates are equal, it means that there's very, very little or zero population growth. In stage 5, we already started to talk about this. Death rates start to go up because it's an increase in aging population. Okay, when there's an aging population, people die of natural causes. It means it's as simple as that. The older you are, the more likely you are to die. Birth rate, that falls because the population itself is older. Therefore, there are less people in the population who are having babies. So birth rate starts to decline, and this leads to a population decrease. Now, we've got certain names for each of these stages, which I just want to give you quite quickly, and you can add these in. So stage 1 is known as high fluctuating. Okay, stage 2 is early expanding. Stage 3, late expanding. Stage 4, low fluctuating. And stage 5, decline. Okay. So there we've got our labelled version of the demographic transition model. I want to look at these stages in a little bit more detail, and just to sort of recap, if you like. So in stage 1, pre-1760 UK, I think I said 1750 before, but give or take 10 years, and Amazonian tribes. You'll have to excuse me, the phone's ringing, I'm not answering that. We'll wait for it to finish. There we go. So birth rates in this stage are high and fluctuating. Okay, and sorry about my handwriting. High and fluctuating, and the reason for this is no access to contraception, or little access to contraception. Okay. Little or no education on family planning. And in many of these societies, there is a need to have children to work, for example. So there's a need to have children to work. Death rates are high, okay, and fluctuating. Okay. That is nowhere near spelt right. High and fluctuating. And the reason that death rates are high and fluctuating is little healthcare, little or no healthcare, maybe unreliable food and water supplies, things like that. Okay, and the total population is low and stable, and that's because there's little difference between births and deaths. Okay, the population pyramids on each side will become much more familiar to you in a later tutorial, but population pyramid shows the structure of the population, okay, with the young at the bottom and the old at the top. Now, a population pyramid in stage 1 tends to have a wide base because there are lots of young people in the population, a high birth rate, okay? But it also tends to have a very narrow top, and that's because few people make it to old age. The death rate is high. If you think about the number of people who are born at this point, reaching the end of their life at this point, there's a huge decrease in the number of people. So that's basically saying that the narrow top means high death rate, wide base means high birth rate. Now, for this stage here, birth rate is the same as stage 1. So they're high and fluctuating, and that's to do with the lack of access to contraception, etc. Birth rates are falling rapidly. Okay, and this is down to better access to healthcare, more reliable food supplies, well, that'll do for now. Okay, more reliable food supplies. Oh, better access to clean water or better sanitation, we'll say. Okay, at this point here, population is starting to increase. Okay, that's because the difference between there is a difference between the birth and the death rates. Okay, death rates are lower than birth rates. Okay, the population pyramid for here is triangular, but you can see in comparison to the previous one, just remember, look like that. which is filled out a little bit more, and that represents that less people are dying. Okay, so we've still got a narrow top, and birth and death rates aren't as low as they could be, but we've still got a wide base showing that birth rates are high. But the fact that it's a bit more triangle shaped rather than that sort of shape, sorry bad drawing, represents the change in the death rate. Okay. Now in stage 3, birth rates are falling. Okay. Death rates are also falling. Population is still going up. Okay. Now the reason for the death rates falling is improvements in all the things that led to the falling death rate in stage 2. Now the birth rates and their falling is down to better education, change in economy, meaning more women work and less children needed to work. Okay, but also it's down to access to contraception and things like that. Okay, and the death rates is same as stage 2. Okay, and we've still got a difference here. If you can see on here, blue line represents the birth rates, green line represents death rates. We've still got a difference here between the two, so we've still got population increase. Okay, birth rates are still higher than death rates. Okay, the population pyramid changes quite significantly here, and we see sort of like a more squared base. Okay, and the reason for that is that more children are surviving into adulthood, but also the birth rate has gone down. So if you just compare it to the previous one, where it was very wide, the birth rate has started to get narrower. Okay, and people are starting to live even longer. More children are living through into adulthood, etc. Okay, stage 4. Now we're at a point where birth rates are low and fluctuating. Okay, and death rates are low and fluctuating. Ooh. And total population is high and stable. Okay. Now the reasons for this is that birth rates are now under control. There's plenty of access to contraception and such like things. Death rates are under control with good medical care. This sort of country would be an MEDC. Okay, so a country like the UK where we've got hospitals, free healthcare, etc. With birth rate, you know, like I said before, you can pop to Tesco's, get condoms, whatever you need, pop to the doctors, get the pill for women, implants, all those sorts of things. There are ways to manage the birth rate, and a lot of people take opportunities of that. Population is high because we've gone through that demographic transition where we've had points where birth rates have been higher than death rates, so that's led to population growth. And it's stable now because both of these are low. Okay, now population pyramid for this looks much fatter. Okay, we can see that the death rates are good now. Their death rates are dead low because people are living much longer. Okay, the lump, if you like, or the peak of population is getting much further up the pyramid. We can tell that death rates are low because actually in at the bottom of it now. Ooh, terrible drawing. Okay. In stage 5, this is where it becomes a little bit. So this is where we're thinking about the change, if you see what I mean, and the actual going into decline. Now, birth rates, okay, are falling, and the reason birth rates are falling again here is because it's to do with the age of the population. Let's take a look at this population pyramid. Now, if we look at top of this population pyramid, you can see a large percentage of our population here are old, okay, or older, if you see what I mean. Okay, and that's basically indicative of the fact that the less of these are going to have babies. If less of these are babies, then our birth rate becomes really, really small at the bottom. death rates are increasing. Okay, the reason they're increasing is because there are more old people. Oh, I'm having a terrible day spelling today, aren't I? Okay, and the reason that more, like, if you think about it, old people eventually die. It's a fact of life, unfortunately, and the more old people there are, the more of them are going to die, and that means that the death rate is going to go up. Now, because here death rate is higher than birth rate, this leads to total population starting to decline, and this gap in between here represents population decrease. Now, if we're looking at the limitations of the demographic transition model, I've taken this from BBC Bite Size, which has got an absolutely brilliant bit on population change and the structure of the population change. Talk about the model of the demographic transition model was developed after studying experiences of countries in Western Europe and North Africa. These are more developed countries, okay? And the actual conditions of population change might be slightly different for less developed countries in different parts of the world. And the fact that the original model doesn't take into account how countries are now declining sort of makes that last bit a little bit uncertain, if you see what I mean. And the inclusion of a stage 5 is pretty important because it starts to explain what's happening in countries like Russia, Germany and Japan. As to conclude, let's think about some summary parts to this. If we were to summarise the demographic transition model, it plots the change in the population over time. It looks at the differences between birth rates and death rates. Shows population changes as a country develops as well. Okay, 4 stages to it. We've got birth rates, death rates, total population, natural increase, and in stage 5, natural decrease. Okay, now go back, review the little bits that we've talked about, use your revision guides, use other websites, whatever, have a look at other bits of the demographic transition model. Just to finish, here's a little Wordle that summarises the main terms that we've talked about today. Hope this has been useful. See you later.